Hi, everyone. I am Rebecca Friedman, the director of the Wolfsonian Public Humanities Lab at Florida International University. Thank you so much for joining us today for our third episode of Coffee and Conversations, Cultural Institutions in Times of Crisis. We very much hope to have and continue to have these weekly conversations regarding the ways in which cultural institutions here, nationally and globally are responding to the coronavirus pandemic. Today, I'm so excited to welcome my colleague and friend, Susan Gladstone, the director of the Jewish Museum of Florida at Florida International University. Susan was appointed as executive director for the Jewish Museum in 2017. And she brings more than 30 years of experience, of executive experience at the national and global levels to the museum and to FIU. Her creativity and her leadership include leading fundraising efforts at the South Beach Food and Wine Festival, which raises more than $2 million per year for FIU, among many, many other experiences. And we're especially proud of the fact, I have to mention, that Susan holds a bachelor's of social work from FIU. In addition, of course, to our other degrees. So let me just, before I turn to Susan, just let you know a little bit about our format for those of you who've not tuned in yet. The format is very simple. We'll basically just talk back and forth for about 20 minutes. And then we'll go ahead and take questions from the audience for about 10 minutes at the end through what should be the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Okay? So welcome, Susan. So happy to have you here today. It's really
Thank you, Rebecca. It's my great pleasure to join you in this format, in this new normal and this new format. I'm very excited to be doing this with you.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in with a very general question. If you would go ahead and tell us a little bit about the work that you do at the Jewish Museum.
So I'd like to start off by saying this is our 25th year. This is our 25th anniversary of being the Jewish Museum of Florida originally, and now the Jewish Museum of Florida-FIU. And it started as a traveling exhibition showcasing the history of Jews in the state of Florida, dating from 1763. And in 1997 became an actual museum with all of that information coming into the building, and under the direction of the founding executive director, Marcia Jo Zarevitz. And the initial mission was to collect, preserve, and interpret the history of Jews in the state of Florida. Since 2012, we've been part of Florida International University, and the mission has expanded because we're now including more academics. We have a wonderful academic director, Dr. Tudor Parfit, who's a very renowned professor. And we have more academic programming, and we've expanded to a little more of an international storytelling than we were prior to being part of FIU. So that's basically, in a nutshell, the mission of the museum, but of course there are many, many aspects of how we make that happen.
Sorry about that.
I can hear you.
All right, here we go. No, thank you very much. It's a very comprehensive overview of what you do. Let's just talk a little bit about the community work that the Jewish Museum does. And if you would talk about how you interface with the community in particular, and what makes it kind of unique in terms of its message today.
Okay. So, although we tell the unique story of the history of Jews coming to this country, actually wasn't even a state yet when, in 1763. The story that we tell is one of immigration. So it's a story of people coming to a new land, learning a new language, learning new customs, finding a way to be successful, to make a living, to make an impact on the world. So we tell the story of those struggles and of the successes. And that's a universal story, and especially here in our community, in which we have people coming from so many different countries and facing those same struggles. And so we feel that the story that we tell can be experienced by anyone in our community, and it's relatable. People can relate to their parents, their grandparents, or even themselves. So we invite many different groups. We have been, of school children and from the community to come in and learn about this specific history, but then translate it into how it affects our entire community. And then we also engage with other organizations in the community, the Miami Jewish Film Festival, American Jewish Committee, JCCs, and FIU, School of International and Public Affairs, your program, the Humanities Lab, to co-sponsor programming so that we can share the wealth of what the community has to offer for our members of the Jewish Museum.
Yeah, no, thank you. I know that your museum does an incredible amount of work engaging in all those ways in the community in ordinary times.
Yes.
And I know you had tremendous programming lined up for this spring, some of which we were involved with and other
Right.
parts of the university. But could you say a little bit about how you and your colleagues are now kind of confronting this new environment, this digital, this remote environment, and how has your museum responded to that, created new avenues of work, and all of that? It would be interesting for our listeners. Thank you.
So I'm going to give a big plug to my staff here, if any of you are watching, because they've all really risen to the occasion and jumped in and embraced our new normal, and have become very creative and very adept. We've become very high tech. For example, I want to tell you this. We had just installed a beautiful exhibit of Judith Lieber handbags. Judith Lieber was a Holocaust survivor who created these fantastically gorgeous handbags, all with Austrian crystals. And we'd only had it up for a week when we had to shut down. So we created a virtual reality tour of it. And then we embedded that virtual reality tour into a Zoom call with 100 women from the local Jewish Federation. And they loved it so much that they called their friends in federations all around the country. And we are now on the schedule in Palm Beach, in Baltimore, in Buffalo, in Kansas City, in New Jersey. We are going national, and I hope maybe even international with our new technology. That's just one example of but we've also instituted new programming. So we have every Wednesday a newsletter that goes out with interesting facts. We have a new program called Thursdays at 3, which is our curator, Jacqueline Goldstein, interviewing local artists. Some of the artists that have had exhibitions at the museum. And then we have a new program called Friday Fun Days with our educator, Luna Goldberg, where she does different projects with children who are at home. So, and then our social media has greatly increased. So we're trying to have touch points with the community 3 or 4 times a week, either a social media or something that they can watch. And of course, as I just said, we're now being able to reach out nationally, which we're getting in this new normal. We're actually getting a wider audience in terms of other parts of the country. That's actually very exciting.
Yeah, no, agreed. I think that's true of many of our institutions, right? That's one side of this whole crisis. I didn't know about half that programming. That's wonderful. I'm going to log right on after this.
Yes, I mean, you can just go onto our website, which I'll give you at the end, and take the virtual reality tour by yourself.
Wonderful.
But the guided tour is available to any group anywhere in the country or world who would like to do it. Just email me or you, and we'll set it up.
Super creative. That's great. So how would you suggest that the public at this point, those listening and elsewhere, could best support your institution and help to kind of support you in all these creative new directions that you find yourself working with and in?
Yeah, so I would say basically please, if you're already a member, renew your membership. Consider upgrading your membership. If you're not a member and you like what you're seeing that we do, become a member. It's really through our members that we're able to provide, the support that we get from our members is enabling us to keep my small but very dedicated staff going and to keep maintaining our beautiful, beautiful building so that it's ready for us when we're ready to open. So that's the best way that the community can literally support us. Of course, watching what we're doing and telling us that you're enjoying it is always also uplifting for the staff, for myself, because we're all working so hard.
Of course. I know that you are. I know that you also had a couple of really interesting exhibitions on the horizon that I personally was so looking forward to, the Bernstein one, and then of course the Barbra Streisand one.
Yes.
Could you maybe tell us a little bit about, well, those specifically, but in general, what you envision for the future? If you could, given all your years of experience, if you could kind of project for us about your museum, but also more generally about what we can imagine for the cultural arts world.
Right. So I'm going to say, I'm still hopeful that we'll be able to do the Barbra Streisand exhibition, but probably not the Leonard Bernstein exhibition. I think that that's going to be a change in the world of museums. These very, very large exhibitions that require tons of shipping and lots of many, many people to install. I think we may not be seeing those for a while. Partly because it's so difficult to know what's going to be happening. Will we be open? Might we have to close again if there's a resurgence? So in our museum, we are planning on focusing on the actual beautiful, gorgeous building in which we exist and a reworking of our core exhibition of the history to make it a little more accessible for people to maintain social distancing. But our museum is located in what was once a sanctuary, an actual sanctuary of prayer. It's an absolutely beautiful building with more than 70 stained glass windows. And when you're in it, it is providing, I believe, a sanctuary from the storm outside that is our current world. And so I'm hoping that when we are able to reopen, that will be the current focus for us of the museum and enable people to come in. Now, talking to other museums, I actually have a call later today with the directors of all the museums and cultural institutions in Miami-Dade County to discuss strategies. And some of those are things like maybe only being open a few days a week, maybe only being open a few hours a week, maybe having tours by appointment, which is more common in Europe than it is here, but where you'd have to schedule so we can control how many people. But I think that we're going to have to make a lot of changes in this new normal. But I do think that our museum itself, I've asked the question, what's important about coming into a museum?
Yeah.
Our building is so beautiful. As much as you could love our virtual reality tours, the experience you get of walking into our building and seeing those streams of light coming through the stained glass windows is an experience you need in person. So I'm hoping we'll be able to provide that within the new parameters of our new normal.
Yeah, that makes
at some time. I don't know when. I don't have an announcement.
No, nobody dare say it. No.
So we're continuing with our virtual museum, and we're continuing to make plans for that. And but stay tuned.
Yeah,
we'll keep you posted on our Wednesday newsletter.
And we will. We absolutely will. I completely agree with you that the museum, and especially the renovations that you've done since under your watch and since you've been director, it's just a beautiful place to be. So I look forward to its reopening.
Thank you.
You mentioned being on a call with a lot of the leaders in our community. So do you imagine, so, I mean, I know you don't know, you haven't had the call yet, but if you could just project, given your experience, that
Right.
we might have some kind of a coordinated effort among local institutions as we move toward whenever that is,
Right.
the
Right.
reopening of museums and cultural
Right.
institutions. That you'll actually work together and coordinate that for the public.
Well, that may be what comes from this call, which, you know, I'm very excited to be included in the call. I know on a national level from some of my interactions with some of the other groups that I'm involved in, like the Council of American Jewish Museums, that the whole country is thinking about, museums are thinking about, and cultural institutions, how to deal with this new normal. I think, unfortunately, some institutions may not survive at all. I think some are talking about just staying digital, you know, now that they've gone that way, just staying that way and becoming virtual reality museums. And I think we're going to see a lot of this changing in format to enable the social distancing. So I'm curious to hear, for example, from the ballet and the symphony, you know, how do you organize that so that you have enough space between everybody? I know that we can create that space in our museum by things like that I mentioned, like timed entrances, and but I think our new normal is going to require people to include this ability, you know, not to be crowded, not to have these. And so we're all going to have to think about how we're going to do that. And I'm very happy to come back and speak to you again after I attend this meeting, find out what my sister museums are doing.
No, absolutely. So one maybe last question I would like to hit on before we open it up for questions. I know you're very involved in various networks, museum networks, I think specifically networks of Jewish museums and institutions around the globe and around the country. Can you give us a sense, if you've learned anything from those networks in particular, about what the responses are, what projections are for the future, what kinds of creative programming partners have done, and so forth in that world?
So again, it's very similar, what I was just mentioning. You know, some museums are having a very difficult time. You know, a lot of museums depend on the gate, what we call the gate, you know, ticket sales.
Right.
And so if nobody's coming through the door, you know, there's a problem. And other museums around the world are continuing with major progress in building entirely new museums, and they're not stopping. So it's going to be different for every museum depending upon their financial situation, the country in which they exist, because certain countries have different formats of government support, and their sense of how they want to deal with all the social distancing. But in particular in CAJM, which is the Council of American Jewish Museums, there's a very big effort on fundraising as a community. So I have another call this afternoon with them to discuss, are there grants, funds, loans specifically for the network of Jewish communities and institutions around the country that we might be able to communally benefit from. And so I'll learn more about that this afternoon as well, but that's a very big focus. So the local institutions are talking about how to reopen, and the Jewish group is talking about how to, as a group, fundraise for our organizations.
Right, that makes sense. And I imagine also fundraise kind of as a whole and as a collective.
Right, exactly. Right. Are there sources that are just interested in supporting the concept of Jewish museums and Jewish community centers, et cetera, as a whole, that we could communally apply to for some assistance?
Makes sense. That makes sense. Let me just ask you now if there are any last, thoughts, observations, that you would like to just share with the audience before we open it up for questions? No pressure, but if you have any.
No, I'm just going to repeat something I said before, which is right now, this museum, as all museums, as all cultural institutions, need you, the community. We need your support more than ever to help us transition into our new normal, to maintain, as I said, our staff and to maintain our building. It's not unique to us, but certainly it is my last thought. Please visit our website, jmof.fiu.edu. Look at our virtual reality tours, tune in for our programming. And from the bottom of my heart, I ask everybody to please, please, please become a member of our family. We're a wonderful family, and it's only through the support of our donors and members that we can keep this going. So
Thank you.
That's my final thought.
Thank you. And I urge you all to do the same. So thank you.
Thank you.
So now I'm just going to go ahead and open it up for questions. We have a couple here. Keep them coming. Okay. The first one is from our very own Deputy Director, Julio Capo.
Okay. Hi, Julio.
Thank you for being here and for sharing all of your observations. He has a rather specific question. He was wondering if there are plans for moving forward with the Will Eisner exhibition.
Well, that's a very interesting question. And my answer is it's really going to depend upon when we're able to go back into the building. We had planned that specifically to run in conjunction with Comic-Con, which is also not going to happen in June. And so if it's possible, that is the kind of an exhibition that we can self-curate without, too much of the things I was mentioning before of, incurring a lot of shipping and freighting. And so depending on the timing, of course, it won't be in conjunction with that. We may still be able to do that. And the same with the Barbara Streisand exhibit. Mm-hmm. So we haven't scratched those off. We just, can't. And if we need to stay digital for a very long time, we could potentially create a digital Will Eisner exhibition. That would be an easier exhibition to create than some others. So there's a good possibility, Julio, that you'll see it in one format or another.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to it also in either format. Thank you. We have a question now from, I don't know if people's names on here are their actual names, so I apologize, but F.A. Hope, and who asks, how do you plan to reach the students who are now off campus? Did you say that you've created a virtual tour of the new museum? Right.
So we have a very dedicated education director, Luna Goldberg, who is working very diligently with your program and with the Honors College to create programming for students. And I'm sorry I didn't mention that before. We just did a virtual reality class, the virtual reality tour for an entire class of students on the campus. And so we're going to continue doing that. We're also involved in a program called STEAM, which is STEM plus arts, which is our museum going out to students. And so that's being done virtually as well. And we have a whole program where they're learning about stained glass windows through. So before it was in person, and now it's being done virtually. So we're still reaching high school students, and frankly, through virtual reality and through Zoom, we're reaching more FIU students than we were when we were trying to get them to come into the building. So no matter what, we're going to continue with that because that's been very successful.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense, given the constant conversations about how to reach the museum from the university.
Right, this is the way. We'll bring ourselves to the students. That's the best way.
Yeah, thank you. So we have two questions now that kind of are more or less about the same issue. So I'm just going to combine them if you don't mind. And they both really involve the question of Holocaust education in particular. And one, they're posed differently, but I think they're trying to get at the same thing. And basically, how in this environment and with the changing face of Judaism and topics within it, like Holocaust education, how does your museum imagine, or how do you see other Jewish museums across the world reimagining in creative ways, thinking about educating the public when it comes to issues of Holocaust remembrance and memory and education?
Right. So first of all, I would like to say that we are not a Holocaust museum. We're a history of the Jewish people, so of course that includes the Holocaust, but there are many museums that are specifically just focused on the Holocaust. And we are not one, we are not one of those. And we do have a wonderful Holocaust memorial located just a mile from us that I encourage people to visit. But we do at FIU have a wonderful Holocaust Studies program directed by Dr. Oren Steer. And so we do include some Holocaust programming every year into our schedule, particularly around the time of January 27th, which is the Liberation of Auschwitz Day. And we also have a donor who has created, Lawrence and Suzanne Fishman, who have created the Fishman Scholar Lecture Series specifically about the Holocaust. So we do incorporate some programming about the Holocaust into our annual programming. And I haven't mentioned that we have quite a robust lecture series run both by Dr. Parfit and some organized by ourselves. Those will all have to be moving to being virtual. But so we do include Holocaust programming, but it's not our main mission. And so it's part of what we incorporate. I feel it's very important, everybody does, but it's a responsibility we share with other resources in the community.
And I guess, thank you. One of the questioners suggested, so I'll just share this, that there might be something particular. I'm aware that your museum is not a Holocaust museum, of course, and there's, as you said, right down the street. But the issue might also be one that we can all think about, is the ways in which kind of memory and remembrance of the Holocaust and other genocides, how that work might be particularly important now, and especially in the context of the Holocaust as survivors get older and sadly pass away.
Right. So, we do have, in conjunction with Oren Steer and his program, and something called Holocaust and Genocide Remembrance Week, again, around, the end of January, beginning of February. We do one big program in our museum, and the rest is on the campus specifically for students so that they can participate. And we did have a major symposium this year, and I'm mentioning it because what we did that was so interesting was a virtual reality a live tour of Auschwitz. So the people in the audience were able to walk through the Auschwitz Museum with us, sitting in our museum. And so again, as we're staying virtual, we still have these opportunities to provide that kind of educational opportunity, both for students and our community. So, and that's something that we did before this change had happened. We were just moving in that direction, but we were able to do that. And so I can definitely see how we can do much more with all this new technology.
No, that's wonderful. Very, very optimistic note. We have time for one last question. And somebody asks you if you could think about and share with us some new Jewish topics that you might imagine that the museum might address as Judaism itself moves into the future. What other kinds of topics do you envision moving forward?
Wow.
I'm going to give you the softball at the end, right?
Yeah, wow, that's a really big one. this may not be exactly what the questioner wants to hear, but I'm going to repeat something I said before about what I think the focus of our museum is going to become. Again, always the core mission, but really the idea of this sanctuary becoming a sanctuary. And I think that's something that we're all going to need. And I think it's something really unique that our museum can provide, physically provide. And I think that as we look at topics, it may be around some of those ways in which Judaism, Jewish history, and our building can contribute to the new normal in our world. So without giving some specifics, that's sort of, I think, the general trend in which we'll be moving. And so, you know, I think it's very important because of such a beautiful building that we have to have people come into the building eventually. Yes. The detailed information we provide virtually is wonderful, but the experience of coming into the building is something you just can't get by looking at it on your computer screen.
That's fair. And that the sense of kind of peacefulness that you describe, I think, is something we could all use right now. So that's a very nice note to end.
Thank you.
And I just want to thank you so much, Susan, for being with us this morning and for joining us and for sharing all of your thoughts on what's going on at the Jewish Museum on the Beach. And I look forward, as you suggested, to updates as things change and as we move forward. And I want to thank the audience for showing up and for listening in and for asking all the great questions that you asked. And I'm just going to end by telling you what's happening next week. So next week, please join us next Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, where my colleague Julio Capo and I will be in conversation with two guests. So we're going to try 4 of us on the screen at once. Helmut Schuster, the director of the Wilzig Museum building in Berlin, and Melissa Blundell-Osario, the director of education for the Wilzig Erotic Art Museum, or WEAM, on South Beach. More information on that is available on our website. And in case you've missed any of the past episodes, please be sure to visit the website, as well as our YouTube channel page for the Wolfsonian Public Humanities Lab. Thank you all so much. And if your questions were not answered, we will print them out and make sure Susan sees them and answers them, and as will I. Okay, thank you all very much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, bye. Thanks, Susan. Okay.